Coming up on the Nexus, the return of Tony Blair. Can he be trusted with Gaza's future? Donald Trump thinks so.
Tony Blair, good man, very good man.
Hello and welcome to the Nexus. I'm Matthew Moore. Now, when Donald Trump announced Tony Blair would be on his so-called Board of Peace to run Gaza, some people thought it was a worthy choice. Others, though, were shocked.
Tony Blair is not a war criminal.
Tony Blair is a man that is clearly hated across the Middle East and around most of the world.
I have no problems with Mr. Blair.
More from them in a moment, but first, let's look at how Blair led, or perhaps misled, Britain into war with Iraq.
It's my honor to welcome the Prime Minister back to Camp David. I look forward to talking to our friend about how to keep the peace.
The point that I would emphasize to you is that the threat from Saddam Hussein and weapons of mass destruction, chemical, biological, potentially nuclear weapons capability, that threat is real.
We will stand up for what we know to be right, to show that we will confront the tyrannies and dictatorships and terrorists who put our way of life at risk.
I'm aware, of course, that people are going to have to take elements of this on the good faith of our intelligence services. The intelligence picture they paint is one accumulated over the last 4 years. It is extensive, detailed, and authoritative. It concludes that Iraq has chemical and biological weapons, that Saddam has continued to produce them, that he has existing and active military plans for the use of chemical and biological weapons, which could be activated within 45 minutes.
They couldn't find any weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. The allegation which were raised by Blair, Doucet, and by the Americans are baseless.
Neither the international community nor the British public is persuaded that there is an urgent and compelling reason for this military action in Iraq. The threshold for war should always be high. None of us can predict the death toll of civilians from the forthcoming bombardment of Iraq.
No, no, no! Bush, ta guerre, on n'en veut pas!
I gave the order for British forces to take part in military action in Iraq. Tonight, British servicemen and women are engaged from air, land and sea. Their mission? To remove Saddam Hussein from power and disarm Iraq of its weapons of mass destruction.
When you told Parliament that the intelligence was extensive, detailed and authoritative, that wasn't true, was it?
No, it was true. There was no doubt about...
It wasn't extensive, it wasn't detailed and it wasn't authoritative.
I'm sorry, it was.
We have concluded that the UK chose to join the invasion of Iraq before the peaceful options for disarmament had been exhausted. Military action at that time was not a last resort. We have also concluded that the judgments about the severity of the threat posed by Iraq's weapons of mass destruction, WMD, were presented with a certainty that was not justified.
You can go back over all the issues to do with weapons of mass destruction and so on, but if you ask the basic question, is the world better off without Saddam than with them, then I think the answer is pretty clear.
Keep in front! I used to do it every time until it's the outside. Face the front!
Are you a war criminal?
Of course I don't believe that. But
Why,
I mean,
why are they calling you one?
Ryan, you know why they are. I apologize for the fact that the intelligence we received was wrong.
For all of this, I express more sorrow, regret, and apology than you may ever know or can believe.
Well, we're about to hear from our panel, but first, here's how Donald Trump first announced Blair's involvement in the Gaza peace process.
My plan calls for the creation of a new international oversight body, the Board of Peace, we call it. The leaders of the Arab world and Israel and everybody involved asked me to do this, so it would be headed by a gentleman known as President Donald J. Trump of the United States. And we'll have a board, and one of the people that wants to be on the board is the UK former Prime Minister, Tony Blair.
And Blair has responded, saying President Trump has put down a bold and intelligent plan. It offers us the best chance of ending 2 years of war, misery and suffering. And I thank President Trump for his leadership, determination and commitment. Well, let's bring in our guests now, and we have Chris Nineham, the deputy leader of the Stop the War Coalition. We also have the political communications specialist and former Labour candidate, Kevin Craig, plus the international politics analyst from Chatham House, Yossi Mekelberg, and finally a spokesman for Fatah, Dr. Jamal Nazzal. Welcome to the programme, everyone. Chris Nineham, let me start with you. What was your reaction when you found out that Tony Blair was going to be involved in the Board for Peace?
Well, I must say I found this decision almost incomprehensible. I think it's shameful. I think it's stupid as well from everyone's point of view. Tony Blair is someone who's responsible for the worst foreign policy catastrophes this country has probably ever seen. He's responsible not just for disasters in foreign policy, the foreign policy world, but specifically the disaster of the Iraq War, which led to over 1 million people dying in the region. So this is his track record in the Middle East. So it seems to me to be a very, very strange and disturbing decision that should never have been made. I also think, from the point of view of the authorities, it's very surprising, because it can only make the plan more unpalatable, because Tony Blair is a man that is clearly hated across the Middle East and around most of the world, actually.
And Chris, are you amongst the people who accuse Tony Blair of essentially being a war criminal?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's the majority opinion in this country. I think that the inquiries into the Iraq war came quite close, including the Chilcot inquiry, came fairly close to making that point. Certainly they said that he deceived the public.
Kevin, you're shaking your head there.
Tony Blair is not a war criminal. The thing that really makes me pleased about why he's got this appointment, to answer your question, is that he's one of the few former international leaders that successfully brought peace to a conflict that had actually lasted not just decades but hundreds of years, when he led the British government that was responsible for bringing peace to the conflict in Northern Ireland. And that experience of bringing people together makes him uniquely qualified to this. And specifically, again, he is not universally hated across Britain and the Middle East. He actually counts a number of very significant Arab leaders as trusted friends and contacts. And he is but one of a number of key people who is very well placed to do the only thing that matters in this debate, which is bring a halt to 2 absolutely horrific years, not just for people who were so horrifically killed by Hamas, but also those who've suffered subsequently in Gaza. So he can make a difference, and he is uniquely qualified to assist. And he's one of those responsible for making Donald Trump look at this option and getting Trump so engaged. And I believe in looking at the positives, notwithstanding the fact that there were mistakes made around Iraq.
Jamal Nazzal, you are a Palestinian. Do you agree with Chris Nineham that Tony Blair is hated?
Well, I don't think it's an issue of names and personalities. The question is not whether Tony Blair is the right person to oversee Gaza, but rather the deeper issue lies in a framework that denies Palestinians the right to govern themselves, even after they have demonstrated their ability to do so. We have a government, a functioning one, in spite of all the Israeli pressure, and the Palestinian government has been certified the ability to govern the Palestinian people back in 2009, when the World Bank, the European Union, and the United Nations have certified that the Palestinian Authority is ready in terms of institution buildings of the State of Palestine. But when it comes to Mr. Blair, he has the experience and he has the credentials to do big things. And in fact, he met with the Palestinian president twice this year, once with the Palestinian president and the vice president. I believe he should be given a chance, but we cannot give up our right to govern ourselves. Let's not forget that the world in New York has talked about recognizing Palestine as a state. So we cannot be ruled by new colonialism in Gaza.
Okay, Jamal, they say it will be a transitional phase. Do you believe them? And once again, do you trust Tony Blair to be on that board of peace?
I have no problems with Mr. Blair, but when Israel said that the Oslo Accord will be a transitional framework, it has lasted 32 years. We are still waiting.
Thank you. Yossi Mekelberg, it's interesting that Jamal, who is Palestinian, has less of a problem with Tony Blair than Chris Nineham does.
I agree with Jamal in this sense. First of all, the issue of transitional. The transitional won't become 10, 15 years down the line. We still have the transition, and then there is a new form of foreign colonialism. I think it's important that it will be well defined how long is this transition going to take. And I think for me, the criteria about all this conversation about Tony Blair is not about Iraq, because Iraq was a mistake, and the war in Iraq should have never happened, definitely not in the way that it took place, but what Mr. Blair can contribute now to a better Gaza, to reconstruction of Gaza, as a transition towards a Palestinian governance. That should be the question. And as was said earlier, Tony Blair is a prime minister with also achievements in Northern Ireland, also domestically here in the UK. Beyond that, I think the fact that President Trump listens to him, and I think some of the more positive aspects in the plan are thanks to Mr. Blair, should tell us something. And yes, he has actually opened door also in some countries, including in the Gulf, that will probably, if he is involved, they will be more interested in supporting this transition period and beyond. So yes, you won't find a prime minister that get into such a thing without any baggage with him. That's the way sometimes you live politics, and the one of Iraq is big. But for everyone that looks into this appointment, if it ever happens, it's the one that what is going to be his contribution? Can he build the trust with Palestinians?
Thank you, Yossi. Now, Chris, you're clearly outnumbered here, even by people from the region. And I would just like to give you the opportunity to make your case again as to why no one in the region should trust Blair.
Well, it's not just a question of baggage. It's a question of a foreign policy record of monumental death and destruction. And Iraq wasn't a mistake. It was a deliberate policy that was championed by Tony Blair more than any other leader, apart from the President of the United States at the time, George Bush. And Iraq was part of a pattern. It followed hard on the heels from the invasion of Afghanistan, which was also championed by Tony Blair, which led to a rogue state. It led to a failed state in Afghanistan. It led to a 20-year occupation that was catastrophic for that country, in the same way that the invasion of Iraq did. And it just beggars belief that a man who has not just this appalling foreign policy record, but a foreign policy record specifically in that region, which has been catastrophic, should even be considered for this role.
We're just going to pause the debate for a minute and have a listen to the public in London. We asked them what they thought about whether or not Tony Blair was the right person to help bring peace to Gaza.
He's done, I don't know anything on the news that he's done to retain peace or promote peace. Like, he's like the epitome of like what I call privileged white man. So like I'm shocked to actually hear that that's the first I've heard of it.
I think he probably is, because he's got experience with, I can't remember, he was a Middle East peace envoy previously.
I don't think anyone from the West is the right person for the job. I think we need to leave the people in the community to make their own decisions.
We need fresh voices, and
a view through a different lens if we're going to go somewhere different.
I think the background experience he had on that field is not helpful to move things forward.
I don't think he's capable, to be honest with you, and he's certainly not trustworthy.
It's very good. I think I know about his story. He is very long experience, and he know about the UK. He worked a lot. He helped a lot, and Tony Blair is a very good option. It's the very best option in the Gaza.
Kevin, it's interesting. There were some supportive voices there. Most, though, were suspicious and concerned. Why do you think it is that Tony Blair's image is still perhaps worse in Britain than it is abroad?
Well, because the Iraq war and the circumstances surrounding that, and essentially the reliance on flawed intelligence, which is what the whole thing came down to, was a very difficult period. And I remember campaigning in the general election that followed all of that. And one at the time, you know, we were saying as candidates, well, don't worry, you know, Tony won't be in for the whole of the next parliament. Now, that's why, for some people, he carries baggage. But in trying to bring peace and a solution where currently there is nothing else on the table, again, I go back to the fact that he is an international statesman and a former leader that has experience of bringing peace and saving lives.
Right.
And if you know about Irish politics in the way that I do, being a joint British-Irish citizen, there are people alive now that would not be because of the work he did in Northern Ireland. And I think he's in the last stage of his life, and I understand why those from Stop the War is a coalition that hates Tony Blair for its own reasons, and I respect that difference of opinion. But Tony Blair is somebody who's very motivated by legacy and trying to bring people together.
Jamal, there was one criticism of Tony Blair when he represented the Middle East Quartet, and when he was an interlocutor between the Palestinians and the Israelis. And one of those, the main criticism was that he took a sort of too business-like approach to it, that he felt that if he could just get economic development going, everything else would fall into line. Is there a danger with Tony Blair that he doesn't have sufficient respect and due consideration for Palestinians' cause and for their political and statehood ambitions?
I think the problem isn't with the personality or the name or the biography or the policies of Blair himself. After all, he himself was placed in this position by the powerful party of this conflict, which is the United States and Israel. And the problem is not with the persons, it's with the power structure of the whole thing. The lack of credibility on the quartet itself, the lack of sincerity of Israel and the United States back then to really making peace with the Palestinian people. And in my view, it's better to focus on the real issue facing the Palestinian people rather than getting caught up in names. While we are not enthusiastic about the current framework of this plan, we are committed.
You mentioned the framework of the plan, and Pakistan's foreign minister has said that the framework of the plan was actually changed after Trump consulted Muslims and Arabs from the region. It was actually changed upon further discussion with Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff. First of all, is that true? And can everyone in the region live with it?
Well, guess what is the worst part of this problem? The PA itself, the Palestinian leadership, wasn't invited to the meeting with Mr. Trump. So we cannot judge by ourselves if the plan was really altered or not. It's an American plan, but the Arab and Muslim countries have signed up to this plan. They have supported it. So have we. So has the Palestinian Authority. The problem is that the PA's role in Gaza is conditional and not immediate. The PA is not slated to be part of the initial administration of Gaza. What we need is for Palestinian laws to be implemented by the Palestinian police forces. For this to happen, it is required that the Palestinian government immediately starts functioning in Gaza so that we do not have the Palestinian people governed by an international body, which is like a foreign rule. We've had enough of that.
Yeah.
We need a Palestinian self-governance within a Palestinian state. Gaza should be and remain part of the Palestinian state to be recognized by the entire world.
Thank you for that. Yossi, what do you make of Jamal's critique here of this board of peace?
I agree with Jamal. I think in ideal world, there will be an immediate leadership, Palestinian leadership that can take over Gaza, united with the West Bank and moving to a viable and genuine peace process. We are not there because of this horrific war. So probably you need something interim. And again, said earlier, my fear is the interim becomes permanent. As long as this is not the case, and it will help new forces within the Palestinian political system, from inside, West Bank and Gaza, and from outside, to build a leadership that can take over from the current leadership and move into uniting the Palestinian society. They have to prove that they are capable of doing that. There are no guarantees. I think on the one hand, I don't think we should completely exclude this idea, but they are there under probation to see that they are doing the right thing, which will end in a two-state solution.
Yossi, thank you for that. We're going to take the program in a slightly different direction now. We're going to take a look at how Blair and a couple of his main political allies at the time they invaded Iraq are now doing very, very well financially.
If what I was interested in doing is making money, I can make a lot more and have a very gentle and easy life. And when they talk about a jet-set lifestyle, well, it actually means I spend a lot of time on jets, which is true.
Tony Blair's literally stayed close to the centre of British politics thanks to a $10 million house in the heart of Westminster. And he's cashed in since leaving office too. His net worth is an estimated $60 million, thanks to lucrative advisory roles and speaking appointments. The Tony Blair Institute, founded in 2016, is an NGO which champions policies including digital IDs. His son Ewan is worth even more. Young Blair's education tech company, Multiverse, which works with the government, means he's worth an estimated $438 million.
Can I still sit here with you and justify both what Tony Blair did and what I said at the time? Yes, I can.
Alistair Campbell was Blair's spin doctor during the Iraq War, known as the man who sexed up the intelligence dossier to make the case for invasion. Despite his role in a war that has cost the lives of hundreds of thousands, Campbell now co-hosts the Rest is Politics podcast alongside former MP Rory Stewart. The pair reportedly rake in $135,000 a month. Campbell's also a prolific poster on X, but many there refuse to let him forget his past.
Peter Mandelson has resigned.
Arch-spin doctor Peter Mandelson was key to getting Blair into Downing Street in the first place, and it served him well. Twice he was made a minister by Blair, and twice had to resign due to financial scandals. But the man known by some as the Prince of Darkness still managed to come back under current PM Keir Starmer, this time as the UK's ambassador to the US.
What a beautiful accent, too. I'd like to have that accent. Thank you. My mother would be proud.
He soon completed an infamous hat-trick. Ambassador Mandelson was dismissed after the closeness of his relationship with convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein came to light.
I regret very, very deeply indeed carrying on that association with him for far longer than I should have done.
So, Chris, from your perspective, they were associated with the disastrous Iraq war, and yet financially and in terms of status doing really, really well. How does that make you feel?
Well, I think not just me, but millions of people in this country are disgusted by the fact that the clique around Blair has done so well out of the disasters that they created in the Middle East, done so well financially. And I just wanted to say finally one thing about the idea that this is the only game in town, that this is the only possible solution on the table. Well, I think that's completely wrong. There's a very different and very simple move that the West could make that would transform the situation very, very quickly. And that would be for the US, Britain and other Western powers to stop arming Israel as it continues its genocide and to break links with Israel. And the level of Western support for Israel is such that that move would create a situation in which Israel was simply no longer capable of militarily dominating the region and inflicting the massacres and the horror that they have been on the Palestinian people.
Thank you, Chris. Kevin, last answer now on Blair and Mandelson and Campbell. They're making a lot of money, with the exception of Mandelson, who's just recently disgraced himself yet again. They have been rehabilitated in public life. And yet, when Alistair Campbell, for example, the former great spin doctor, mentions anything on Twitter, you'll notice that there are long lines of people ready to say, this coming from a man who deceived Britain into going to war and who has blood on his hands, perhaps the lives of up to 1 million people. So you tell me, are these men shameless?
No, they're not shameless, and the blood lies on the hands of murderous dictators like Saddam Hussein. The thing I like about Tony Blair is that he still wants to try and make a difference to a situation. Tony Blair has a record of peacekeeping, of bringing nations together, not just in Northern Ireland, but in Europe and in Kosovo and in Africa and Sierra Leone. And there is no other realistic scenario on the table for anyone concerned about all the lives being lost currently in the Middle East. And Tony Blair is somebody who served this country with distinction and is not universally reviled in the way that you may have heard today.
Kevin Craig, Chris Nineham, Yossi Mekelberg and Jamal Nazzal, thank you all very much, much appreciated. And thank you at home and on your phones for watching. If you want to see this episode or any of our previous episodes, do go to our channel on YouTube. Just type in Nexus TRT World. Until next week then, goodbye.